Hey guys, in this video we are going to be talking about finding slope and y-intercept from equations, graphs, and also tables. So let's get started with finding slope and y-intercept from equations first. It says the equation y equals 0.06x plus 4.61 represents the number of job openings in the US, which is y, in millions after x months. All right, so number one wants to know what the slope of the line that represents this scenario. So slope is always found in front of x. So you may be familiar with the equation y equals mx plus b. That's what we're going to be using a lot in this section here. So m is always your slope, and b is always your y-intercept. That's what we're focusing on today. So if I'm going to find the slope from the equation that I'm given, it's that coefficient of x, the number in front of x. So that means my slope is 0.06. And then we also want to know what the slope represents in the context of this scenario. So remember that x is the number of months and y is the number of job openings in the United States. So what's happening here is the number of job openings is increasing by 0.06 million people per month. So the number of job openings increases by 0.06 million per month. All right, question 2, or 3 actually. What is the y-intercept of this scenario? So the y-intercept is always that constant at the end of your equation. So in this case, it's 4.61. And then we also want to know what it represents in this scenario. So your y-intercept is always your starting point. So at the start of whenever it was that they were measuring the job openings. So at the start there were 4.61 million job openings. And that last question there, write the equation. Obviously, we already have the equation, so we don't have to do that for this one. So that would be it. You find the slope, tell me what it represents. Find the y-intercept, tell me what it represents. Let's try the next one. It says the equation y equals 9x plus 183 represents the number of users, which is y in millions, on a social media platform after x years. All right, same idea. What is the slope? In this case, the slope is 9, and I suppose we should be putting labels on this. So this is 9 million users per year, which then directly takes us into question number 2, which is what does the slope represent in the context of this scenario? So it means the number of users increases, because it's positive, by 9 million per year. Question 3, what is the y-intercept? Well, the y-intercept is 183, and it's a y-intercept. Y represents number of users, so 183, in this case, million users, which just means that at the start of whenever they were measuring this, so at the start, the social media platform had 183 million users. All right, let's move on from equations and start talking about tables. It says Tom works at an aquarium shop on Saturdays rather. his job is to clean the tanks. Before cleaning, the tanks need to be emptied. The table to the right shows the time, which is X, it takes to empty all of the gallons of water, which is Y, out of one particular tank. All right, so this says, what is the slope of the line that represents this scenario? So we're gonna have to figure that out. Now, something you need to know about slope is that it is always change in Y, which is what this triangle is, over change in X. So we're gonna focus on how the Y's are changing versus how the X's are changing. So if I look, we go from 175 to 150, which is minus 25. And then from 150 to 125, which again is minus 25. And if you look, it decreases by 25 each time it goes down. Now let's focus on the X's. The X's increase by 1 each time we move to the next data point. Okay, and it does that all the way up the table. So if my slope is always change in Y over change in X, I know that my change in Y in this case is minus 25. And my change in X is a positive 1. Well, negative 25 over positive 1 is negative 25. So that means my slope is negative 25, and it's losing gallons per, let's see, is it minutes? Shows the time. It doesn't really say, so we'll say minute, gallons per minute. Okay. Number 2, what does the slope represent in the context of this scenario? So the slope means that the tank loses, because it is negative, 25 gallons of water per minute. Okay, so that's the slope. Now the y-intercept is always whatever y is when x is 0. Because remember, if you think about a y-intercept, if we're focusing on the xy plane, this vertical axis, that's your y-axis. So any point on that axis is going to have an x equal to 0. So I'm looking for what y is when x is 0. And luckily for us, the table gives us that. Y is 175 when x is 0, so that means that my y-intercept is 175 gallons. And all that means is, at the start, so before draining, the tank had 175 gallons of water. All right, number 5. Now we can write the equation. So remember, your equation is y equals mx plus b. Your slope is your m, your y-intercept is your b. So we're going to take those two things that we just found and write an equation. So for number 5, I have y equals, my m is negative 25, x, and my y-intercept is 175, which is positive, so I'm going to put plus 175. And that would be my equation for this scenario. Let's try another one. The table to the right shows the amount of flour needed to make a certain amount of pancakes. All right, so we've got the amount of flour, which is x, number of pancakes, which is y, and we're going to find the same two things that we found for the last few problems. First, what is the slope? Again, slope is always, or m is always change in y over change in x. So let's find the change in y. So as I go down the table, I am increasing the number of pancakes by 12 each time. And as I go down the table on the left side, which is my x, or my cups of flour, that increases by 2 each time. So if I'm going to find my slope, it's the change in y, which is 12, over the change in x, which is 2, and that simplifies to 6. So that means my slope is 6 pancakes per cup of flour, which helps us answer question number 2, which is what does the slope represent? And all it means is you can make 6 pancakes for each cup of flour. All right, now we got to find the y-intercept. Unlike the last problem, they didn't give us what y is when x is 0, but that doesn't mean we can't find it. So remember, as you go down the table, we increase by 12. So as you go up the table, we would decrease by 12. We're going the opposite direction. So to go up 1, instead of going plus 12, I'd go minus 12, which gives me 0. Similarly, over here, instead of adding 2, I'm going to subtract 2, which gives me 0. So when x is 0, y is also 0, which means that my y-intercept is 0 pancakes. Which makes sense, right? If you use no flour, you get no pancakes, which is exactly what this means here. So before using any flour, or at the start, you could say that too, you have no pancakes. All right, and the last thing we're gonna do here is write our equation. So number 5, y equals mx plus b. So y equals 6x. And then I could put plus 0 if I want to, but you don't have to. I'll show both. So plus 0 or y equals 6x. Both are the same equation. All right, let's try the same thing, but from a graph. Okay, Angelina bought a 15-pound bag of food for her dog. The graph to the right shows the amount of food remaining in the bag, which is y after x days. So we're gonna do the same thing. We gotta find the slope and we gotta find the y-intercept so that we can write the equation. So there's a couple ways we can do this. You could make a table of values using some of the points on the graph. We could count, because remember, slope is still change in y over change in x. So all we would do is figure out how much we either rise or fall from the beginning point and how far over we go to get to the other point. And then we got to find the y-intercept. I personally like to just count if I can, but you have to make sure if you're going to do it that way that you pay attention to the scale. So the y-axis is changing by 10s, the x-axis is changing by 5s. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the 2 points that they gave us. So I'm going to outline my triangle here. You don't have to if you don't want to. But notice that these are going by 10s, and they are going down. So it's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. But since it's going down, that's negative 60. And then it's going to go over 25. Okay, so when I go to write out my slope, it's negative 60 over 25, and we are going to use a calculator to simplify that as much as we can. But we're going to want to leave it as a fraction because it's just going to make our life a little bit easier as we learn how to do these types of problems. So I'm going to put it in as a fraction. It's negative 60 over 25, which simplifies to negative 12/5. All right, so when I go to write my slope, I know that my slope is negative 12 over 5, and we're talking about dog food, let's see, remaining in the bag after X days. So it doesn't really say how, let's just call it cups per day. We don't actually know what the measurement is of what is remaining, so we're going to use something that's kind of reasonable. All right, so then for problem number 2, this is the first problem we've had where our slope is not a whole number. So let's talk about how we can use our fraction here to say what it means in terms of the problem. Now remember, it's always y over x. And I know that it's losing 12/5 per day. So I'm going to say that the bag loses, and then it's y over x, so it's 12 cups. This line here is like per, so per or every 5 days. So it's cups per day. So the bag loses 12 cups per day, or you could say that the dog eats 12 cups per day. Both are correct. Now let's talk about the y-intercept, which in this case you can get directly from the graph. It's where the line in this case touches the x-axis, which is right there at 60, which would be cups. So that just means at the start, the bag had 60 cups of dog food. Good. Now the last thing we're going to do is write our equation. So y equals mx plus b. Y equals negative 12/5 x plus my y-intercept, which is 60. So that would be my equation. All right, let's try one more. The graph to the right shows the median prices for small cottages on a lake since 2005. Okay? What is the slope of the line that represents this scenario? Now this graph did not give us points this time, so we have to make our own. I try to use the y-intercept as much as possible, so if it's perfectly on the grid, I'm going to use that. And when I say the grid, I'm talking about these lighter lines here. You want to find a point that you could tell what the x and y value are of that point, so that's very easy for you to find the slope. The y-intercept is usually a good point, and this one here, I noticed that it is at 550, so I'm just going to go ahead and use that one. Now we do have to try and figure out what the scale is changing by as well. So the y-axis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but it's actually 50, so that means it's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. It's going up by 10 for each line on the y-axis. The x-axis, on the other hand, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is increasing by 1s. So if I go to find my slope, this time I have to go up and over to get to the rightmost point. It is increasing by 10, or $10,000, and then for every 5 years. So if I go to find my slope, again, it's change in y over change in x. So 10 over 5, which is 2. That means my slope is $2,000. So 2, because it's in thousand, every year. So per year. So all that means is that cottage prices increase $2,000 per year. Good. All right, the y-intercept is right here. It's one notch below 50, which means it's at 40. So this is number 3. And again, this is in dollars, $40,000. So that means that at the start, which in this case, we know what the start is, right? This says cottage prices since 2005. So that means in 2005, cottages cost $40,000. All right, and then finally we're going to write the equation. So it's y equals, it's changing by 2, x plus the starting value, which is 40. That would be the equation. And that's it. That's how you find slope and y-intercept from various forms, and how to write the equation in slope-intercept form.